We now move to wind-up speeches, and I call Maggie Chapman up to 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It is interesting, perhaps serendipitous, that this debate follows the earlier ministerial statement on low emission zones. I was heartened in that statement and the questions to hear the Cabinet Secretary state very clearly that the primary purpose of LEZs is to improve public health. It was not all that long ago when many people could not see the links between our transport infrastructure and individual and community health and well-being. As my colleague Ariane Burgess said in her opening remarks, we understand that a well-maintained road network is important for our economy and our communities. But it is not enough on its own. Our transport system also has an impact on physical and mental health, on access to culture and leisure facilities, on access to education and work, on so many different aspects of our lives, pretty much every aspect of our lives. In that joined-up way of thinking, so we need an integrated and coherent approach to transport. We should, as highlighted already this afternoon, be doing all we can to change how we use our roads. If we reduce the amount of freight and commuting traffic on our roads by shifting goods and passengers to rail, then we reduce the building and maintenance costs for our road network and our local authorities. Modal shift for people and for goods is vital. It is good for safety, it is good for climate emissions, and it's good for efficient and effective use of public money. Modal shift will also mean that we don't just replace polluting vehicles with electric vehicles. Private car use does not always meet people's needs, and we know we can catalyse shifts away from car use if we provide alternatives. We see that very, very clearly in other parts of the world. And for those people who say that we need to retain we just need a replacement of internal combustion engine vehicles with electric vehicles, I think if we look back over 100 years, when the Victorians were looking at their transport system and they wanted to get between places better, one of the answers was faster horses. That works up only to a point. Along comes the combustion engine and changes everything. We know with technology and the right kinds of investment we can do that. Our transport system is also a key driver of inequality in our communities.
Mr Ewing. Please continue, Ms Chapman.
Our transport system, the Tories might not want to listen to this, but this is actually something that fundamentally affects your constituents as well as mine. The transport system is also a key driver of inequalities in our communities. Those who do not have access to cars need affordable, and Scottish Greens would say free, public transport. We should be investing in buses and trains, and I thank Alex Rowley for highlighting the Bus Partnership Fund in his amendment. People in the lowest income group use bus services more than 3 times as often as those in the higher income groups. According to the Equality Trust, the richest 10% receives £977.4 million in transport subsidy. The poorest 10% receive just £296.7 million. Road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men, who are the main beneficiaries of reducing journey times between cities. Road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men. Road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men, who are the main...
I apologise that, I started off the stream with Maggie Chapman for almost 4 minutes, but I had to let that play. Just white men, of course, white men. So road building is to benefit white men. Oh, dearie me, I don't know. I really don't know. Some of the fucking waffle that comes out of the Scottish Parliament from time to time. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. This is a Rhodesian woman, by the way, who's managed to find herself in the Scottish Parliament shitting on white men. But I'm with PBC, and we're not doing anything too serious on this stream. It's just obviously there's a lot of fucking waffle that's come out the last few days in regards to politics, debating, if you want to call it that. What would you call it? Would you call it debating?
Call it masturbating.
Right. Well, that's enough of that. You won't be speaking for the remainder of the stream. We'll strike one, and your only strike. But no, we caught a wee bit of the gimpy little debate that was going on last night on TV, and it's just my granny's quite invested in all that stuff. And I was kind of sitting there like, we're talking shite, you know what I mean? But yeah, how do you feel about that? You know, road building is to benefit white men. Do you agree with the statement?
Well, it kind of helps. It kind of helps to get to places if you've got roads, rather than well, the land that she comes from, Rhodesia,
Yeah.
being in the southern part of Africa.
Aye.
Some of these people are travelling for miles just to get water.
Mm.
It's not really the best use of their time, is it? To be perfectly honest.
It's fucking nonsense. It's just this constant attack on like private car use. And she made a comment as well there about like people. She goes on about inequality and whatnot. You know, there's usual tropes they come out with, but they keep going. Like they're trying to like get people out their cars, but yet the alternatives to car use or owning your own car is obviously like public transport, and it's unaffordable for a lot of people. Like trains are ridiculous.
Let's just use the example of you coming to visit me
Yeah.
on a train or a bus, for example.
Mhm.
I don't know how much it costs you to fill your tank.
About 50, 60 quid now, thanks to Papa Putin.
Right, so to get you from spending 50 quid or whatever on your tank into a car, into a bus or a train, it would have to be less for it to be more
Appealing,
advantageous.
no.
Aye, but it costs more.
Exactly.
It costs more, and you've got the added hassle of having to get a bus station, having to book a ticket, having to be there for a certain time. You're
Mhm.
restricted to the times that you can leave. And with the
Mhm.
trains, it's another, 20 quid on top of that.
Yeah.
So it's not affordable. Public transport is not affordable. It's not as effective.
It's unreliable, I know.
And in the winter, when I was coming up here, how many times were the buses and trains cancelled because of snow
Yeah,
or
exactly.
wind?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even lesser things than that. Like, how many times have you come up the road to the Highlands and you've been on a bus where the toilets don't even fucking work? You know what I mean? There's nothing about public transportation that is remotely appealing.
The amount of buses I've been on, and I use the buses far more often than you do because I really don't like driving for that length of time
Yeah.
because it is a big drive. But I'm on a bus for 4 hours. You expect to at least be able to use the toilet when there's a toilet available. And
Yeah.
many times the toilet's not functioning. Or in the summer, the air conditioning doesn't work. So you're sat boiling.
Yeah.
Or in the winter, they've got the air conditioning on full blast and you're freezing to death.
Mm.
So they don't seem to be able to make it comfortable to be able to travel from A to B at a reasonable price and to be able to do it in comfort.
Yeah, it's just why I just don't get that. I mean, they're hell bent on getting us out of our cars, but yet surely a very good method of achieving that goal would be to make the alternative appealing, and instead of that, the alternative is shit. You know, which is making people less inclined to either part with their cash or get out of their car. You know, it makes no sense to me. I mean, I personally will never get on a bus if I can avoid it. And for long distances, I'm too tall for that shite. But you know, I would prefer a train, but trains are too expensive. So, but and as for this question, I have no idea about her heritage apart from the fact she's fucking she's from Rhodesia.
She
But
might well be fond of wearing small hats.
she might be. I don't know. I really don't know. But
I think she likes beans.
Stenson would say a good old bean flick. I think that's safe to say.
She's a cunning linguist.
Right. That's enough of that strike to it for you. But good to see you, Amps, and good to see you, Mark Ritchie, as well, bud. Aye. So there's that. That was Maggie Chapman shitting on white men. When do they not shit on white men? To be honest, I mean it's a regular occurrence nowadays. I'm kind of used to it at this point. I guess it's part of the demoralization agenda. I guess where I'm just water off a duck's back at this point. But regardless, so you know, so what's been happening the last few days in the world of politics? Well, I've not really been paying much attention, to be honest. Not gonna lie, you know what I mean. But I do know that there was some leaders' debate last night. I haven't watched all of it. Caught a wee bit of it on the TV towards the end, whatnot, and it's just as I say, what a load of shite. But then I did see this bit from our bald wet wipe down at Westminster, and I thought I'd play this for people here from Stephen Flynn. You know, bootlicking for the immigration, of course. As always, you know, love their immigration. So we'll get that playing, shall we?
On to our next question, and this one comes from Lorenzo Barba.
Where I live in Essex, I'm struggling to find a house. I've noticed the roads are busier and it's almost impossible to get a doctor's appointment. I think immigration is partly to blame. What are the parties going to do about immigration?
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for that. And I'm going to turn first to Stephen Flynn.
So I accept the premise of what you're saying in respect of your area. I'm afraid I don't know it very well, but let me say a few home truths, particularly to some members of this panel. Migration is absolutely essential to our public services, it's absolutely essential to our businesses, and it's absolutely essential to our economic growth. And what we need to do is end the demonisation of migration. In Scotland, we have a declining working age population despite a net number of people moving from the rest of the UK to Scotland. We need migrants. And this race to the bottom on migration, driven by Nigel Farage, followed by the Conservative Party, and hotly chased by the Labour Party, does not serve Scotland's interests. And it does not serve your interests either. So rise up against it. Do as Keir Starmer did in 2020 and talk about the benefits of migration, its importance to our fundamental aspects of life.
To be clear, any voter in Scotland who wants lower immigration should vote for other parties.
I think any voter in Scotland who wants to impact our economy, impact our NHS, should vote for the parties who want to cut migration, which is the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, and Nigel Farage. And this is a consequence of us being led down the garden path by the right wing in British politics for far too long. We need to stand against it. We need to promote our economy, promote our public services, and to do so by promoting migration.
Where to begin with that shite? You know what I mean? Where to begin with that shite? And where did that comment go to? Imagine watching this is Saturday. Like, first of all, this is not a serious stream. But I will say, on top of that, though, these throwaway comments from these people, I can't not address them from time to time, because people in this country lap this bullshit up. And regardless of, like, the differences or lack thereof when it comes to, like, political parties, like the SNP, time after time after time after time in this country, when election after election after election, and I don't really necessarily think there'd be much of a difference if any other party did get in, but while the SNP remain in their position, all we keep hearing about in this country is about the EU and a fucking referendum, and it's just, I want this bullshit to stop. And I just wish, like, your average SNP voter would listen to this, and I'd like to sit them down and make them listen to what this dickhead just said there, and then ask them the question, like, is this really what you're in favour of? You know, because I find it baffling. Well, what's your opinion on that shite that he just said there?
Well, he's saying basically you need migration to grow the economy and to run a country. So his party are basically saying that there's not enough people here, effectively. Yet they're in favour of abortion up to the point of birth. They are in favour of that. So instead of trying to encourage more Scottish people to be born, to be productive members of this society, to encourage our kids to go to school, to learn trades, or to learn skilled and educated jobs, maybe lawyers, doctors, whatever, their answer to a shortfall in the population isn't to increase their own population organically, but to increase people who don't come from here, which is going to dilute and dissolve, because when you add salt to water, you're dissolving that salt. That salt doesn't become more salty, it becomes less. So when you add more migrants into a population of white people, that white population becomes less, until the point, and this was something I spoke about with your gran earlier, we were talking about, you live in the Highlands, she dealt with people who came from the islands in her job, and there is no mosques and things over in Lewis. When you're replacing the indigenous population of these small communities of a couple of hundred people with brown people, black people, people who are not from these lands, you're committing genocide effectively on these populations, because the newcomers aren't going to be upholding the rituals, the celebrations. They don't know what the customs are. They're not going to encourage their children to learn it. And you've seen, obviously, the schools are encouraging diversity and inclusion of these countries of origin of these people. So instead of celebrating Scottish culture and that being the forefront, it's the culture that they're coming from that's been put to the forefront, and Scottish culture has been put in the back burner, which means that our culture has been watered down, diluted, and effectively erased. Because if they're saying that anybody can be Scottish, even if they don't want to be, if they don't want to be an African Scot, if they don't want to be an African Scot, if they want to be Nigerian, living in Scotland, we're calling them a new Scot, and we're giving them the status of Scottish, whether they want it or not, even if they have their loyalties lying elsewhere on another continent. And they're effectively just erasing everything there is to be here. And this guy is sat there saying, oh, the answer to a declining population happens to be increase your population of people who don't come from here. It's utter nonsense.
You know, as well, like, just like the guy's initial question, he was on about like where he's from, and
Services being
he
pushed.
points out like that everything's a lot like busier, roads are busier, services are longer waiting lists, or the words whatever he used. That's obviously what he was alluded to. And this bald dickhead just kind of goes, I get what you're saying, but we need to stop demonizing migrants. Like, you don't get what you're saying then. It's so annoying to hear all these politicians, this absolute claptrap all the time, and they just completely refuse to even acknowledge that immigration plays and it's a seriously significant role, but they won't even meet you halfway and concede that, yeah, it might play a little bit of a role in exacerbating waiting lists, etc., school placements, dentistry, and whatever the case may be. They refuse to even acknowledge that it plays even the remotest fucking part to play in regards to that. They just refuse to accept that, because in order for them to concede that would kind of be like a sort of open goal to their opponents to be able to, pounce on them and say, see, this is why we need to reduce immigration. So they just refuse to accept it, despite the reality being polar opposite. You know what I mean? It's fucking ridiculous. I mean, there's parts of the UK that, to that guy's question, when he asked the panel there, like, he's absolutely correct. The waiting lists and whatnot, obviously completely exacerbated with COVID and whatnot. I mean, things are fucking hell of a lot worse. I don't think the NHS will ever recover, to be honest. Let's be frank about it. But on top of that as well, even the nonsense that we need these immigrants for our public services. No, we don't. We fucking don't. What they really mean by that is we need immigrants in our public service to accommodate all of the new immigrants that we have. If we didn't have the immigrants, you wouldn't need more and more doctors to accommodate said immigrants, you know? And the third thing was, kind of going back full circle to sort of to your point and what I was saying before, I'll ask you to chime in there. Like, these guys are supposed to be Scottish nationalists. What's our fucking Scottish nationalist sits on live TV and says that bullshit? He should be, if he was legitimately a Scottish nationalist who had your best interests at heart, he had the Scottish people's best interests at heart, he would be expressing concern that there's by his own words, there's a decline in our population, birth rate speaking. But no, that's fine. Because what we're going to do, mate, is we're just going to open the door for to immigrants, mate. And that's solve all our problems. Oh, it's not right, Mr. Scottish nationalist. But my point... what's this? That one got me off guard. But it's like, This is what annoys me about it, and this is why I always feel compelled to end up reacting to bullshit like this. Like, I mean, I don't even believe necessarily that he believes this shit that he's saying, but this is the party line that they're all towing, and it's the people, the average person on the street that laps this shit up. Who in their right fucking mind thinks this bald, wet flannel's a Scottish nationalist? Honestly, you can't tell me he's a Scottish nationalist. There is not one single legitimate nationalist, regardless of country, whether it be German, Polish, fucking Bulgarian, or even Japanese, who's going to sit there and salivate at the prospect of opening our borders to people who do not come from here in order to have children on behalf of his own people while self-declaring to be a nationalist. Bollocks.
He's also championing the rights of other countries to celebrate their own nationalities, whilst championing the decline of Scottish people in their own homeland to have a homeland of their own.
It's just a fucking donkey, man. Honest to fuck. These people are just insufferable. I absolutely despise the SNP, and I really do hope in this election, right? And I'm not on the Sensum communum train, by the way. I've had quite a few live stream back and forth with Sensum with his fucking nonsense about everyone should vote Labour. I'm like, why? Why would I do that? However, the more Labour seats that there is come July the 4th or the 5th, whenever the votes will be counted, and the less SNP seats, it means there'll be a slightly less of this shit that I have to listen to from so-called Scottish nationalists. I mean, it's pathetic, It's fucking pathetic. It's embarrassing, Oh, fucking hell. Let's see what else gets said. I don't know if anything else does get said here. I'll skip it back a wee bit,
which is the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, and Nigel Farage. And this is a consequence of us being led down the garden path by the right wing in British politics for far too long. We need to stand against it. We need to promote our economy, promote our public services, and to do so by promoting migration.
Nigel Farage.
Well, I mean, I'm on a platform tonight with 6 other people whose parties have been wholly unconcerned with the issue of immigration. They think that to even question it somehow makes you a bad person. Let's get back to Lorenzo's question. Let's deal with some logic, shall we? From the end of the 1940s
That'll be a novelty for you.
until Mr. Blair got to power, listen to the numbers. You probably don't know them. For 50 years, net migration into Britain was 30 to 40,000 a year. Then Tony Blair gets in, decides to open the doors. We get net migration for the period of the Labour government of 2.7 million people come in that period. Then we get the Conservatives, elected in 2010, 2015, 2017, telling us they'll reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. 4.3 million the Conservatives have led in. Most of those that come in are not directly productive members of the economy. Most of those that come in are actually dependents. And Lorenzo, the truth of it is, this ought to be the immigration election. Because whether we talk about housing, whether we talk about the fact that rents are up between 20 and 30% in most of the country in the last 4 years, whether we talk about the roads, whether we talk about infrastructure, we are living through a population crisis, an increase of 10 million people since Mr. Blair came to power. And frankly, it's making us poorer. It is diminishing our quality of life. And it's nothing to do with race or any of those issues. It's to do with actually putting the interests of our communities first. We need to get net migration. And that means, by the way, people come and people go. We need to get net migration down to an even figure for the next few years. And maybe then we can hope to catch up with housing, with health, and many of those things.
Most of those coming to the...
This is coming from a guy, just on a wee side note, Nigel Farage. Do you not remember like a few years ago? I can't remember if it was before the referendum in 2016 or if it was like during the farce that was the alleged negotiations and whatnot post 2016, where he came out and said that like Brexit could be a good opportunity to make it easier for immigrants from the Commonwealth to come here. You know, okay, mate. You know, he talks a good game. I can't fault Nigel Farage for his ability to talk a good game. But I by no means trust him any more or any less than I do not trust any other politician. I get Nigel Farage reminds me of somebody. It's almost as if you were to look at like politics as like just a total game. I get the impression of Nigel Farage that he's sort of put in these positions to speak to the sort of talking points that are legitimate in terms of everybody, not everybody, but the vast majority of people are concerned about immigration. And he states the obvious in relation to it. Like, no, it's not. I wouldn't even go that far. It's almost like he's put in that position. So it makes people think this is our man. This is who we will rally behind. But then he never wins. He fucking never wins. Right? The status quo continues because he never wins, you know? But like everybody in the country feels like they tried, you know, it just wasn't good enough when there was never actually any intention from the state to allow for any actual change to be implemented. It's almost, that's the sort of vibe I get off the guy, to be honest. You know, there's so many people that think, oh, vote reform, but away. What? Why? I'm not discrediting anybody that wants to go and do that. Me personally, I feel like, look what he did to UKIP, for example. I mean, maybe I am sort of discrediting the idea. Look what he did with UKIP in that back in the day. Like, come on, I don't know.
His bottle crashed.
I don't know. he does talk a good game though, but
He's a good orator.
he is good. You can't
But-
fault him. There's not many politicians I can think of in the UK that are actually better at speaking than him.
Well, George Galloway is also a good orator.
George
but
Galloway's really good.
He is also weak on certain
Oh,
points.
yeah.
And they can speak to the cows come home. If their policies aren't there and if the backbone of their argument isn't valid,
Yeah.
it doesn't resonate with the people, they can speak all they want.
Yeah.
I've seen George Galloway basically take down the American Senate
Yeah.
when he was talking about them accusing him of basically being corrupt and having oil barrels and being in the pocket of Saddam Hussein. And he stood there and he faced down the mighty wrath of the US Senate. And he done so quite eloquently. He done it very well. But things like COVID, or these sort of comments that are things that you want your politicians to be speaking out and questioning. Maybe they don't believe completely the conspiratorial theorists' version of events, but they might want to be questioning, why are we doing this? Why are we locking down our pubs? Why are we shutting our businesses? Why is our kids wearing masks? All that stuff was just glossed over. Nigel Farage and Galloway were both weak on that subject. They've been weak on subjects concerning war or impending war with Russia. This whole Ukraine and even the Israeli thing, where we're being pushed into the beginnings of a war that could trigger World War III. And they're talking, Rishi Sunak came out, what was it, last week or the week before, talking about national service. He's mentioning national service. So they're putting these ideas out there into the public. And nobody seems to be pushing back and saying, why would our young men want to go fight for a country that, if you believe SNP and the Greens and Labour, and even to an extent the Tories, they're all promoting this white man bad, colonialism is the cancer of the West ideal, yet they want our young people to be signing up to go and fight for some rich man's war in a land where they're never going to go. They would never choose to go. How many kids would choose to go to Ukraine or Israel off of their own back? None of them. But they want them to go and fight for these countries. Yet they're being taught day in, day out in schools that they're all bad, they're racist, they're colonialists and whatever. Yet they're being told, go and fight for the colonialists. Because
well, to
be
be,
a patriot.
I mean, I do think though, I'll be honest, that the Tories come out with that shite as a means to sort of ensure Labour win. To be honest, I mean, why the fuck would you, why would they have come out with something so fucking
Labour's going to
ridiculous?
get in.
Of course they are, which is more to this, the comment there on the screen, which I'll get to in a second. But even the thing that happened, on D-Day, like Rishi Sunak was at some D-Day event, and he fucked off halfway through to attend an interview. So he was getting absolutely berated and whatnot by all the media. I'm like, it's just like, it's
They're rubbing
it's
their
fail.
nose
No,
in it.
it's fail after fail after fail after fail. Like self-vote for the Tories. It's like they're trying to deliberately ensure they lose the election.
And they're doing it on purpose.
Wait, before you go down there though, so this I see you boomer. Like that comment there though. So I was looking at the voting intention of Scots today, and the consensus points to Labour winning. I mean, I think really the question in the Scottish context is just how much by. You know, will it mean that Labour obtain a majority in Scotland, or will the SNP still obtain a majority? Nothing will really change in that regard, because bear in mind the SNP and Labour not really any different at all. The rise of the SNP correlated directly in Scotland with the fall of Labour. It was a lot of Labour voters and Labour members that became SNP members of the same fucking party, really. Only difference being though, only one party out of the two of them, for the time being anyway, never shuts up about pretending to be nationalists, and only one party out of the two of them doesn't shut the fuck up about the EU and whatnot. So, you know, I'm sick of it. And it's just the fucking constant nonsense that, like that bald dickhead that I just played the video of there. Like what he's saying is cringe, and we've heard this shit 1,000 times before, but it's the amount of people within Scotland who think he's a nationalist. It's so annoying. It's so annoying. Like, just say your gay shit if you're going to say it, right? Preach to your cult if you're going to. Advocate for what you want, but just be somewhat sincere with your intentions. Don't call yourself a nationalist. Don't pretend that you're for the Scots. Stop fucking pretending this is about independence or whatnot. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's not about the independence, it's about the EU. They let that slip sometimes, of course. But, you know, by and large, it's just the EU. I could go on like a broken record, but yet their opponents are they're nationalists. They're not fucking nationalists. Stop calling them nationalists. Stop doing that. Right? Maybe I could sleep a bit easier at night if they would just stop doing that. As far as Labour winning overall, I think that's a given. But there's a question mark over there in a Scottish context for how much or how little they win. And as for this comment, where did that one go? What's this one? Did you see that this by that press journalist? Aren't the Nats lovely? Aren't the Scottish Nats lovely? English commie psycho parking himself in Scotland to keep the SNPee artificially afloat. I haven't watched any videos of that guy since the fucking wee video I made on him, to be honest. to be honest. But again, kind of to my point there, like, stop calling them nationalists. You honestly think some dickhead with like, or some woman with a bowl cut is dyed blue or purple, and if you go onto their Twitter, they've got Ukraine flags and pronouns in their bios and whatnot. And they scream about Palestine and the EU. You really think they're nationalists? Come on, now. It's so annoying. Really, really, really annoying. I agree with there. I think we both agree with there, to be honest. You know, this right wing, left wing shite. I mean, even that Stephen Flynn said that they're like, oh, this is the right wing. I mean, it's said as if it's supposed to mean something. Like, so what? Even if that was true, and like anti-immigration sentiment was a product of the right wing, and you know, because obviously he's trying to say that, and it comes from a perspective that like he's fucking progressive at them is the norm. I don't know. But yeah, I think we've ranted there for quite some time, you know. Let's see what's been said. Oh, like Gudgy. I would like. You won't like this, but I think Scottish Tories should be given a term to give SNP Labour a short, sharp shock. Do you know what, mate? Let me just tell you one thing quite quickly about the Scottish Tories. Obviously, they're the Tories from Westminster, but they're just the Scottish sort of branch of them. But if we're looking simply at their semantics or the things that they come out with and the things that they push for in Parliament and whatnot, and their exchanges and etc. If they were to like break away from the Tories of Westminster, and there was talk of that a few years ago, if they were to break away from the Tories of Westminster, right, and become their own party, and they were genuine, I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying if they were genuinely sincere in the things that they believe, they probably could. They'd be like a much more widely known version of the Scottish Family Party, more or less. You know, they kind of say the same shit, to be honest, on the same party in many respects. But I can't help but feel that the Scottish Tories, again, it's like, it just really depends on how you look at politics. And I don't want to sound like some sort of fucking schizophrenic, like, but when I look at them, and I kind of just sometimes feel that they just say that so it looks like there's some opposition, because they can oppose everything. It doesn't matter. It's gonna pass anyway. You know, whether it's like whether it's what was it, the hate crime bill? You know, they opposed it. Doesn't matter anyway because all the other parties voted for it. Or whether it was like gender reform, didn't really matter. Everybody else voted for it. But the Tories, they can vote against it. You know, so they look like the opposition, but they know damn well it's not going to matter anyway. I could be wrong, but regardless, that's just my like 2 cents in it. But as far as their rhetoric is concerned, yeah, they do say all the right things more often than not. But don't be mistaken, and I'll just add another wee side note there. Because when it comes to the issues that sort of surpass politics, such as Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, or even the climate change targets and whatnot, Scottish Tories were in favour of all three. Unanimous vote across the entirety of the Parliament, you know. But I don't know. That's just my take on it. Do you have anything after that? Like,
I wish the Tories would take a harder line, to be honest, and show a massive difference, but I think they've been pretty wishy-washy when it comes to these things. Douglas Ross is not a good leader. He's really not.
not really, no.
He's not got the charisma or the gumption to be able to stand up. Whether it's Nicola Sturgeon or Hamza Yusuf or even the tortoise that is John Swinney. Like, these people, John Swinney's getting no persona.
No.
Hamza didn't have a persona. Nicola Sturgeon did. She'd a following. She'd a cult following. whether you liked her or whether you hated her, she had a following because she had a personality. And it might have been a shite personality, but she had a personality and she appealed to a demographic of people. Hamza turned a lot of people off. One, because he's a Muslim. Two, because he's a cunt. John Swinney is a pretendy Christian, wants to be seen to be Christian, but he opposes everything that Christianity stands for. And he's not got anything about him that makes him have any sort of character of standing. So the majority of people who vote SNP are only voting for it because of John Swinney.
No,
They didn't vote for it when he was in power the last time, when he was in the charge of the SNP. He was just a figurehead because nobody else wanted the job. And it's the same now. Nobody else wants a job because it's a poison chalice. But we've got these pretendy politicians, and we've got people like Douglas Ross pretending to oppose them. Douglas Ross could really ramp up the support for Scottish Tories by going all out against the SNP. He could completely change the view of Tories in Scotland, because a lot of women, and I speak to a lot of the women who are opposed to the gender reform stuff, specifically in the LGBT education. I've spoken to them for years, and many of them were SNP voters at one point, and they've leaned more towards the Tories because the Tories are the only party in Scotland who are opposing it. Because Labour's for it, the Greens are definitely for it, Lib Dems are all for it, SNP are clearly for it. So the only other party is the Tories, and they're sort of semi against it. If they opposed it vehemently and they said, look, we are not going to have men in women's jails, we're not going to have men in women's toilets, we're not going to have this sex education shite where kids are being taught to chop their bits off, that's all going to be against the law. If they brought back some sort of semblance of what was that Tory thingy, sex education 28, section 28,
Oh, the fucking
anti-gay promotion thing. If they brought back some sort of modern version of that, they would do well, because the amount of mothers, the amount of people who don't agree with the SNP's more extreme views, like you've got people who vote SNP because they want independence, then there's the people who vote SNP because they want the whole pro-sex liberation sort of nonsense that's been tagged on, that was never part of that party's standing in the first place. That's just something that they've latched onto to win votes. And they don't even believe, the majority of these SNP people don't even believe in the shite that they're promoting, because the ones who've got families know that values matter. The ones who don't, like Nicola Sturgeon, and obviously Patrick Harvey's not an SNP, but he's a Green. These people are childless. They don't have any skin in the game. If this world burns and crashes, they don't have anything to lose. Anybody who's got kids knows they want the future for their children to be better than what they had. And the future that we're presenting to our children right now is less.
Doesn't say much though for the ones that do have kids.
No, it doesn't.
Man, to be honest, I've always questioned that. Like, what the fuck? Then that obviously, because some of them will be corrupt as fucking, money talks and whatnot. But I think some of them are just ideologically driven. Whether or not they've got kids, they genuinely believe the fucking shit they're saying. They do not. And I've always wondered about that. It's like, there's some of the people that have you not thought of the consequences of what that's going to mean for your grandchildren and whatnot.
I don't know if it's wrong. I voted for Brexit, and the reason that I wanted opportunities for work to be available to my children when they came of age to be looking for jobs and for opportunities at better spaces that are available for health and education is now less than it was when my kids were born, because the amount of people that's come into this country. And all you get from politicians is, we need mass migration, we need we need to be diverse. We need to include people. We need to be looking at alternatives instead of encouraging. No, it's a crime in this country to stand outside an abortion clinic and offer a woman who might want a sympathetic ear and an alternative opinion to be presented to her because she's not been told that there might be another way out of that situation that she's found herself in. Instead of that being an option, we're being told that that woman's right to abort that child because that might be the only opinion that she's been told. And that's not the opinion that it used to be, because it used to be that to have an abortion in this country, you had to have 2 doctors sign off on it, and they changed the law to make it 1 doctor. They made it easier to access abortion. They've made it easier to access abortion without any impact on the mother's mental health, because to get an abortion 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had to prove that the mother's health was at risk for carrying that pregnancy to term, and they had to have 2 doctors sign off on it. Now, they just have to say they want one, and they can get one. And this could be a 12-year-old girl, or it could be a 45-year-old woman. There's a whole scope of difference in between these 2 parameters. However, they don't tell women that after they've had abortions, and this happens to a lot of women, they have lifelong guilt over what they've done when the realisation comes in that it wasn't a clump of cells that they've aborted, that was their child. And they might meet a partner and they might not have a child with that partner because their body's not able to produce a child. They've surpassed their fertile years or whatever. These women are being told that this whole abortion thing is the answer to their problem. And then when it comes to it and they look back and the decisions that they've made, there's no counselling available for these women. So they're pushing women to get abortions because they're saying it's your right to choose to abort that baby. But when the woman goes, hang on, 10 years ago I aborted my baby, now I want to have one because I've met a nice guy and I'm in a settled position. I can't have one because my body's no participating. They don't have the facilities to cope with the amount of women, and 1/4 of children in Scotland that are conceived are aborted annually in this country. And yet the answer to that, according to Stephen Flynn, is to increase your population by not making 1/4 of these pregnancies go ahead to be live births, but to import people who are not from these lands. They don't have your customs, and they don't like you, and they don't want to share your values, and they don't even, according to the video the other day, there's 131 languages in Glasgow. They don't even want to speak your language. They just want to come here and leech off your resources.
Well said. It's this one here as well. If all this social Marxism is satanic at its source, then doesn't that suggest this is largely a spiritual war and not solely a political one? I don't necessarily think it's a political war at all, really. I mean, yeah, it's presented as such, but I don't necessarily think that at all. I genuinely am of the belief, and I've said so for fucking years now, really. Not in my opinion means much in the grand scheme of things, but I do think that this is just if you look at like every sort of thing that's going on, whether it's like climate change, etc., like everything is geared towards just shitting on white nations and whatnot. You know, it's trying to get rid of white people, really. You know, it's kind of what I think it is. I mean, yes, I've got religious friends. One of my best friends is Scott Sarmer. He's a Christian, and these people will tell you that they think it's a spiritual war, and I'm inclined to agree to a certain extent. But the only reason that I'm totally on board with that is because I'm not religious myself. So that's just
Anglo-Saxons comment there.
Yeah.
I've got quite a bit to say about that because I believe, and I don't know whether you believe this or not, but I've read quite a bit into the Tavistock Centre of basically mindfuckery and what they've done over the course of the last 100 years, because they've had various different names. But these people influence not just think tanks, government sort of agencies. They influence the media. They influence the music industry. They influence TV, film. These people are basically running this country and I'm just trying to see here. With the whole Tavistock agenda, it was to get women out of the home. Before the First World War, there was no women working that wasn't a spinster or didn't have kids. Women who had kids didn't work outside the home. You had women in service that were maybe unmarried women. When they met a husband, they would retreat, they'd become housewives, blah, blah, blah. After the First World War, or during the First World War, they had women out of the house. During the Second World War, they also introduced, specifically in Britain, they had these sort of Yankee soldiers stationed here whilst our men were fighting in Germany. So they brought in, a lot of them were interracial, because you had black guys that were stationed here. You had men coming back from 3-4 years serving over in Europe, coming home, and their wife had a toddler that was clearly not theirs. Then they were influencing these women to believe that the best thing for them would be to work outside the house, to have a job. And nothing since the end of the Second World War has ever been the same in this country, because women have been taught that consumerism, buying stuff, owning items is better than having a family, and that is the be all and end all. And my mum's gran grew up at a time when there was no NHS, there was no welfare state. She had 13 children. She lost a whack of kids in a short space of time because of different tragedies. I'm not going to specify on what they are, but she'd a spate of kids died, maybe about 5-6 kids died in an 18-month period due to illness and various different things. That woman lived till she was 91 without the welfare state, without having the benefit of benefit systems being in place. And she was a hard worker. She gave up her job to raise her kids. She gave up her job to look after her husband. And women are being taught that having a family is detrimental to their good health and their well-being, when the majority of women, if they were given the opportunity, if their husband could go to work and they could stay home, their kids, actually, it's proven that kids do better when the mother's at home. It would open up more jobs for men, because the women would be at home looking after their kids. There wouldn't be the outgoings in the household if you've got two parents working. My niece and my nephew both work. They've both got small kids, and they pay an extortionate amount of money towards private people looking after their kids, whether it's out of school care or nursery education. Instead of the mothers being able to stay home, they've not been able to do that. So they have to pay I don't even know how much it costs, a couple of £100 a month for people to look after their kids. And if you've got more than one kid,
Sorry.
you're putting me off, you wee shite. Other people are looking after their kids while the kids are being passed from pillar to post, and it's just, we've went the complete opposite of nature when it comes to kids and women, and we need to get back to what people's roles are. Men are supposed to be out there bringing in the bacon and providing, and women are supposed to be nurturing. And people can pretend that feminism and all this other shite that's been brought in the last 50 years has made a difference. To the average woman, it's actually probably made them less empowered than what they think, because now they're having to work just to give somebody else their kid, and their kid to resent them because they've not gotten the attention of their parent. And in 20 years' time, when the kid's grown up, they sit there and they say, well, I wish my parent was at home, rather than having all the trainers and the holidays that the parents think their kids actually want.
I mean, obviously, I missed half that because I wear it for a fuck. But yeah, so this is obviously, I'm going to see if I can get this up instead, because there was a new segment about it. that I could fucking play instead of listening to shite from Parliament. Because this is obviously coming out as well. And again, as I said earlier on, like to that comment, fuck the SNP, fuck the Tories. Totally agree with you, mate. Totally agree with you. Like, bear in mind, like, all the climate change bollocks that's going on in Scotland, as well as is going on everywhere else, cross-party consensus, so including the Tories. But let me see if I can get it. Oh yeah, here. This bit here. This clip here is like a couple of weeks old, but this is now it's now been implemented. Share this instead. There we go. Let me get that.
Now, in just over a week's time, low emission zones, also known as LEZs, will be enforced in 3 more Scottish cities. £60 fines will be issued to drivers using vehicles which don't meet minimum emission standards in Dundee, Edinburgh and Aberdeen. They are already in force in Glasgow. And as Louise Cowie has been finding out, the schemes are being met with a mixed response. Dundee's low emission zone started 2 years ago, but a grace period has been in place to allow people to prepare. That ends next Thursday. Vehicles that don't meet minimum emission standards will be affected. For example, if you're driving a diesel vehicle registered before September 2015 and enter this area from the 30th of May, you'll be issued with a £60 fine. LEZs in Edinburgh and Aberdeen will go live on the 1st of June, a year after Glasgow's. With the countdown on, the Transport Secretary is reminding residents and businesses why they're in place.
Low emission zones take place across Europe. There are 320 cities that have them. Dundee, Aberdeen and Edinburgh are joining them. Quality of health and well-being and quality of life are important for people to be attracted to live, work and come and visit our city centres.
Martin Goodfellow runs a bakery chain which has stores across Tayside. He says the LEZ was a factor in the closure of their Dundee city centre branch.
I'm not against the principles of reducing emissions and improving air quality. I don't think these days anybody is. But I don't believe that this policy is going to do that. I think it is simply going to drive people out of the town centre and therefore increase emissions in the process. And in so doing, jeopardised the future of the city centre.
And there's been a mixed reaction from residents in Aberdeen.
I think they'll be okay. Like, anything that helps the environment has got to be a benefit to the city.
I've got an old car that won't pass the test. It's going to affect me quite a bit.
Not all of us can afford a nice new car that can drive through the low emission zones.
You can find out if your vehicle is compliant or not and if you might be eligible for support on the LEZ Scotland website.
LEZ zones. You know, what annoys me about that, to be honest, I mean, for some people, they don't think it's a big deal. Like, oh well, if your car is like LEZ compliant, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is first and foremost that again, you know, I the last few streams I've kind of had a sort of concurrent theme where I'll talk about something else, but I'll bring in the SNP at the beginning, you know, because like. Well, they sit there and talk, oh, my independence, and people seem to get sort of caught up in that bullshit and fall for it and think that they're nationalists and they care about you. This is the SNP doing this shit. This is the SNP doing it. This is your Scottish nationalists. So Scottish nationalists are shafting the average man or woman, you know, whether it's cab drivers and whatnot that have been put out of business because they can't afford to upgrade their car and whatnot, or the average man or woman in the street who just so happens to have a car that goes under, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, I think it's like if you've got a 2015 plate or older, so 2014, 2013, etc., then you will be fined. You know, so you need a newer car. And in this day and age, newer cars are fucking really expensive. Road tax is a lot higher nowadays, as is car insurance, etc. People cannot afford these things. You know, it's never-ending shafting. There's other things that they're wanting to implement, or there's been talks of them wanting to implement, such as parking levy tax and whatnot, you know, so you have to like pay to park outside your business, etc. You know, it's just constant money-making schemes, but it's masqueraded as combating climate change, you know. It's the SNP doing this. Yeah, this is your Scottish nationalists. And on top of that as well, when they talk about air pollution and whatnot, this started in Glasgow, and it's since been proven that their initial claims to justify the scheme to begin with, such as Glasgow's air pollution being allegedly what would be considered too high, it was never too high to begin with. So the whole premise for this scheme to begin with was founded on false claims. And even if we were to take it at face value that what was happening in Glasgow in terms of the air pollution being too high, even if we pretend or we accept that that was in fact the reality, why are they doing it everywhere else now? You know, they even want to do it up in Inverness, right? So I live in Inverness Shire. I'm pretty close to the city itself of Inverness, right? They want to do it up here, Inverness. The only little tiny city that there is in the Highlands of Scotland, they want to slap an LEZ zone in there, which will fundamentally fucking penalise yet more drivers. You know, Highland Council have put it on the back burner for now, only because they want to pedestrianise our main cities, city centre streets and whatnot. They've got some scheme that they intend to implement, which is apparently going to court soon. It's just fucking ridiculous. It's just honestly ridiculous. It's just never ending. I mean, who voted for that bullshit? Who voted for it? Climate change. I love it. It's such a great topic, great talking point. Here's this as well. I'm not playing all this fucking bullshit. Fuck that. But I'll play a little bit of it. I'm assuming your man 42 is probably streaming soon, so I'm not going to stream cuck him, even though he booted me off his streams because he's a fucking bitch. Anyway, here we go. Let's listen to this shit.
Or interruptions, and I call on Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop. Up to 10 minutes, please.
Presiding officer, when it comes to protecting health and tackling the climate emergency, which all of us in Parliament claim to have an interest in and claim to say is a priority, the warm words and the rhetoric are the easy part. The hard bit is taking action. In fact, I recall at the time of the 2019 Transport Act passing through Parliament, Liam Kerr, Conservative, stating, I quote, "We believe that low emission zone schemes are a good thing," end quote. And Colin Smith, Labour, at the time was very supportive. I quote, "The proposals on low emission zones introduce a much needed framework and they are very welcome." And showing the support extended across all parties, Mike Rumbles, Liberal Democrat, said there are good measures in the bill, such as the creation of low emission zones. Now, this government will never shy away from taking the tough action that is required to protect the health of the most vulnerable and tackling the biggest threat that our planet faces. And I am therefore pleased to inform the Chamber that after several years of development...
I mean, I know we're preaching to the choir here, but this is... it's just so protecting the planet. I mean, they're taking the fucking piss. Even if what they were saying was legitimately correct in terms of, like, if we were to stop polluting, we would help the planet. It's Scotland. We're not China. We're not Russia. We're not even Germany or France. We're a tiny, tiny part of a tiny, tiny island, and they want to just start implementing all these policies that they claim are going to help the fucking planet. The planet. In terms of size comparatives, with an ant next to I don't know, I was going to say a beach ball, but that's probably doing it a disservice. What would it be? I forgot, unless you're like a flat earth or something, but it'd be like an ant next to, I don't know, a football field or something. Like, come on. These people read their scripts and they pretend to be climatologists. And I mean, you don't even need to be like really intelligent or well informed when it comes to like knowing what to say to push back against them, etc. Like, there is people out there that are very, very clued up on all of the sort of what's classified as climate denialism, etc. You don't even need to do that. Just pick holes in an argument. If these people were so concerned about the climate, if these people genuinely believe the science that they claim they do, then why is it that we hear about it occasionally, but yet they've got multiple days of the week and the months, etc., to talk about independence in a Scottish context, or fucking gay rights, or gender recognition bills, or even stand like they were, like Stephen Flynn and whatnot were doing the other day, stand in a BBC studio and fucking debate over immigration and why they should be voted for in the upcoming election. Surely the climate catastrophe or impending doom, our fate where we all burn to a cinder, should take such a high priority that there should be no talk of elections. There should be no talk of why we should vote for other people. There should be no talk of what we need to do going forward for whatever it may be, potholes or gay rights and whatnot. No, it should be, we're going to die soon, but they don't do that, do they? So they put all these policies into place and they justify it by using alarmism. But if they genuinely believe the alarmism that they fucking constantly spout off about, then everything else that they do shouldn't be happening. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, but I mean, it's just so annoying.
Nope.
Nah. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know, mate. But oh, fucking hell. No, they're not. That's kind of like the whole fucking point of this, really. Like, no, they're not. It's just really frustrating, really. Really frustrating. Really, really, really frustrating to listen to their bullshit. You know, just you poke holes through their narratives. You can't. You don't need to be a big brainer. Like, a fucking baboon could pick holes through their narrative. But, you know, time and time again, it's just met with deafening silence, really. I think we'll leave after one last video. I don't want to take up too much more time of people's Saturday evening, but where is... I think I'll put this one on. It's only fucking 50 seconds long. Yeah, wait a second. I mean, this stuff annoys me as well. So we'll get to this. The Scottish nationalism, bro. You know, yeah, my Braveheart, bro. My Braveheart, like, hey. Fucking hell. I mean, this is like the quality content, you know, that you can expect from an election cycle. You know, it's just fucking fuck off. Stop fucking voting for these people. Seriously.
And I'll just come to that. But why has that position changed? Because the big difference I see from when Nicola Sturgeon said that to when you dropped that is a difference in the polls. You were more confident about getting a majority back then, and you're less confident now.
No, I think the reason that position changed, and in fairness, it wasn't actually agreed by the party. It was Nicola's position. It wasn't the party's position. The reason it changed is that because in order to achieve independence, you have to have a referendum. You have to have the gold standard, which is recognised by our friends and allies in Europe, of course, who we want to join as an independent European nation. That's why the party took a pragmatic decision to say that when we win the election in Scotland, which I believe we will win a majority of seats in Scotland, we can therefore have discussions with the UK government to put that into democratic effect. And it's for the UK government and Keir Starmer to outline whether he's going to respect Scotland's democracy or not.
People fall for that shit. People fall for it. Scotland's democracy. Honestly, I think I said this in like one of my other streams, one of the last ones. I think it was like the penultimate one or the one part of that. And I said, like, every time there's an election cycle, the SNPee just fucking, they whip out the the sort of tactic book and they just repeat the same script. The reality of the matter is this, right? They talk about democracy. I'm fucking sick of that word. It's just, it means nothing. It means nothing coming from a party, especially, but not limited to, but coming from a party that spent every year post 2016 teaming up with all of Westminster to prevent a referendum in 2016 from being upheld, right? There's your democracy right there. The same party that have said on multiple occasions that in the event of us ever winning our alleged independence, air quote unquote, referendum, we wouldn't have a simultaneous or a subsequent referendum on whether or not we wish to rejoin the EU or not. They have gone so far as to say that they're one and the same. So a vote for independence is a vote for the EU. That's democracy, apparently. No, that's literally hypocrisy. You know what I mean? Oh, imagine that. A politician or politicians being hypocrites. It's remarkable. Never seen that before. But the problem with the SNP that separates them from the rest is they are never held to account in any regard. Their opposition never say these things. The media never say these things. They are met with nothing but softball bullshit questions. And that is why a cult in this country has been allowed to manifest over the years. That combined with the fact that they have completely subverted what was once upon a time a legitimate desire for some in this country, which was independence. Why wouldn't you want that for your country? Some are legitimate unionists and whatnot, and more power to them. Do what the fuck you want. I don't care. I don't even really give a shit what the SNP or their people do. I just wish to be honest about it. Eh? You want to be in the EU, stop calling yourself an independence movement. It's not that difficult, is it? And you're fucking not nationalists. You know, they are not nationalists. That's like calling Les Battersby a fucking Bengali. I mean, one is... I don't even know where that came from. It's just fucking stop, eh? Just stop. Just shut the fuck up. Right. Anyway, I could go on a bit longer, but I'm not going to take up any more of people's times. Have a good Saturday night, whatever you are doing, and don't vote SNP, because if you do, then I'm going to question your sexuality. Adios.